While playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor, I thought it'd be really interesting to play the same section of the game over and over again on different difficulty levels to see how differently the AI behave. And I think you'll be surprised with some of the results, especially how aggressive the enemies can be, even on the easier difficulties. One of the main things I wanted to see is how many enemies attack you at the same time on the harder difficulties, if not only their attacks deal more damage, but if they also try and group around you more and chase after you through the levels of Jedi Survivor. I decided to perform this test on a section of the Coruscant map, which is the opening planet in the game, as I felt it had a consistent amount of enemies, but a variety of enemy types to come and attack me. We're going to be facing off against groups of stormtroopers. There'll be stormtrooper commanders, scout troopers, as well as a DT series sentry droid, and also a few bounty hunters. Now each time I played on a different difficulty, I also made Cal a different appearance. So hopefully you can keep track of which one is which, and hopefully this video gives you a better idea of the difference between difficulties. Let's do it. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. So changing the difficulty in Jedi Survivor modifies three main things. First of all, your parry timing. On story mode, you'll have plenty of time for parrying and won't really need to be too precise when pressing the block button to break your enemy's guard. The next thing difficulty changes is incoming damage, being the amount of damage you take from enemy attacks. And the third thing is enemy aggression, how aggressive the enemies are with you, how many of them are coming at you at once, which is what I'm assuming, and how frequently they attack. Also, just for reference, in case you're wondering, I've been playing my main story run through of Jedi Survivor on the Jedi Padawan difficulty, which is the second easiest. I felt this was a challenging enough level for me, as I wanted to get through as much of the story as quickly as possible. Okay, so let's start out with the Jedi Story Mode difficulty, obviously the easiest in the game. I was surprised, even on this difficulty, multiple enemies will attack you at the same time. Some of the stormtroopers were shooting me at the same time I was attacking the scout trooper, but enemies are just simply way easier to take down. They have a lot less guard, Cal's attacks seem to do more damage, and even though there were still a few times I was being hit when surrounded by enemies, it never really felt like I was going to die. I think the best part about this difficulty, if you're wanting a complete story mode experience, is the fact you take barely any damage from enemy attacks. I feel like I could stand here for basically 5 minutes and just let the enemies do what they want, and I probably still wouldn't die. That became especially obvious when I made it to the section later on and faced these two bounty hunters. I stood here for a good while just letting them have their way with me, and they really seemed to pose no threat at all. Just wait until we up the difficulty.
One less Jedi.
The DT series droid was also no real trouble at all on this difficulty. I could basically just stand in front of him as he allowed me to attack, and he didn't really do much to retaliate. Once again though, I'm still surprised multiple enemies will attack you at the same time. They just won't do much damage. Now the Jedi Padawan difficulty honestly feels like quite a large step up from story mode. In this mode, your parry timing is still quite forgiving, but enemies deal more damage and are more aggressive. That said, I wouldn't say this makes the game easy. It's more just doable, playable, and even certain boss fights in the game I found to be quite challenging in this mode. Multiple enemies will still attack you at the same time, and at times I found myself being surrounded by scout troopers, especially the ones with the shields being quite frustrating to deal with. Multiple enemies will likely also be shooting you during this time, and if I'm being honest, when facing these two bounty hunters, I was still struggling. Now, as you guys might know, I'm not the most amazing Jedi Survivor player, but I'd still say I'm decent, average. But certain enemies are definitely still a challenge. Purge troopers in this game I haven't found to be all that challenging. I don't know if your abilities since the first game are just what's compensating for the improvement against these guys, or if they're just a bit nerfed since the first game, seeing as though they were some of the harder mini bosses in Jedi Fallen Order. But for me, I consider Padawan as a fun, challenging difficulty. It's not too hard that I'm gonna rage quit, but it's also still a challenge at times. And if I'm being honest, you feel like a Jedi because you're owning stormtroopers and the runts of the Empire. Now on the Jedi Knight difficulty, I found that the enemies behave quite differently. Based on what I've seen online of you guys playing Jedi Survivor, I asked you guys on Twitter what difficulty you're playing on. Most people said Jedi Knight, which I guess is the middle difficulty. It's the most neutral. But here, enemies really take things up a notch. Stormtroopers shoot a lot faster, their blasts are more frequent, scout troopers will come at you in numbers, and it's also harder to break their guard as your parry timing is decreased. Here, I felt was the first time time, I had to be a lot more meticulous about timing my attacks with just the regular enemies. No longer did I feel like a glass cannon, like I could just run into a group of enemies and start attacking them all and feel like, yeah, I'm a Jedi, I can deal with this. On this mode, you can get yourself into real trouble if you're not thinking. That said, Cal's force powers and saber abilities are still powerful enough on this mode to deal with multiple enemies at the same time. I was using the saber throw successfully, dealing with multiple scout troopers. But overall, I still wouldn't say I was being completely swarmed by enemies. It kind of depended where I was. The KX series droids were kind of a grind to take down, and that's how I felt against some of the heavier enemies in the game on the higher difficulties. It just becomes more of a grind. It just takes longer to wear them down, and you need to be more careful about dodging their attacks. Now, the BT series droid on this mode became quite a hassle, and honestly was the first time I was scared against one of these things. He would not stop coming at me, and my attacks felt like they were barely dealing any damage. What I thought was interesting about this mode is not how aggressive all the enemies become at once, but just how aggressive single enemies on their own can be, especially the heavier ones. Suddenly facing these big guys felt like a threat, like a challenge that I could complete, but one that would take some patience and timing. And for me to hopefully not lose my sanity like I did when I played The Rise of Skywalker in LEGO Star Wars. Look guys, I'm actually doing it. You see? I told you I would. I told you I would. Purge troopers, for the most part, I didn't really feel presented too much of a problem, and for the most part, I kept at bay with my saber throws. Also, the bounty hunters really stepped up their aggression on this mode, both attacking at the same time. I felt they were still manageable, and it wasn't so much the damage that I took from their attacks, but more so the frequency of them. The fact they were dodging more of mine, the fact they were attacking me more aggressively, which is what I was expecting, but once again, I think patience here would persevere. Now, the Jedi Master difficulty, I'm going to say, was my breaking point. And on this mode, I found multiple enemies would all come at me at the same time, all attacking at the same time. And I felt on this mode, I couldn't really rely just on my lightsabers anymore. I felt like the game was forcing me to lean more into my force powers, use those overpowered abilities like the ground slam, just to gain control of situations where there were multiple enemies all coming at me at the same time. That said, regular enemies like scout troopers and stormtroopers didn't really pose a threat, especially when they were in smaller numbers. I kind of just saw it as, yeah, I have lightsabers, I'm gonna own you. But dealing with some of the heavies, it was so frustrating getting hit just once and losing more than half of your health bar. The BT series droid really took some patience on this mode. He was so aggressive, would not stop coming at me, and for the most part I felt myself just trying to keep him at a distance with my saber throws and wear him down until I could finally deal the finishing blow. Also, each time I faced him, there were multiple enemies coming at me all at the same time. I felt like I should deal with these guys first, using a force push to kind of get rid of them all, so then I could just focus on the big boy. Purge Trooper once again on this difficulty, no real hassle. Destroyed him with my lightsaber throws. But man, the bounty hunters really surprised me. I really couldn't cope with their aggression. They were constantly pushing me back. I was trying to isolate and only attack one of them at a time, but they'd somehow find a way to both surround me, with either one of them shooting me, the other charging with their shield, and this definitely felt like more of a proper boss battle. On Jedi Grandmaster, you have the least amount of parry timing, meaning your parries need to be basically perfect, and enemies deal a ridiculous amount of damage.
Your end is forthcoming.
That said, I wouldn't say enemies on this mode were that much more aggressive than they were on Jedi Master. Even though this stat is seemingly increased, I didn't really notice too much of a difference. But when it comes to damage dealt, man, I was struggling. Even getting hit by a single stormtrooper shot and staggering backwards could be detrimental. That said, it was interesting to see that all enemies would chase you at the same time on Jedi Grandmaster. They wouldn't necessarily all attack at once. And of course, all of them were still completely susceptible to my force powers. Regular enemies I still felt like I could deal with pretty easily, and with the heavier enemies, it was more just about the damage they dealt. A single hit was all it took before I needed to heal with the stim, and I constantly felt myself retreating, trying to get out of tricky situations when being overwhelmed by a big boy. For this though, I felt it was more just about patience, about having the patience to wait, to time your attacks right, and to do what was necessary to take out one of these guys. Oh, one other thing on this difficulty, I also felt my block was significantly decreased, just because of how much more frequently I was using it to deflect blaster bolts or incoming attacks. I was consistently running out of block and had to get out of the way, get out of trouble, or get around a corner just to hide for safety and give myself a second. I also had no idea how to deal with the BT Sentry droid. BT Sentry droid. No! on this mode, super aggressive, kept coming at me, would not give me a chance to even rest, to attack, to even heal using a stim. And this is kind of what you'd expect them to be, I guess, in the canon. Insanely dangerous droid that's going to keep coming at you until you're dead. Also, the bounty hunters, mate, forget about it. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere, and you'd have to practice these boss fights, play them over and over again, learn the enemy strategies before you even have a chance of defeating it. My block was consistently running out here as they kept firing on me both at the same time and not even giving me a chance to attack. I feel going back and looking back at the footage, I should have used more force powers to try and suspend them, to try and stop them from attacking and give me a chance to deal some damage. But it'd also be interesting to try a lightsaber only challenge, seeing if this is even winnable without using certain force powers. You might have also noticed throughout all this footage, I've been using the dual bladed lightsaber stance. I'd love to try this kind of challenge using different lightsaber stances, see if they have a different effect, and see if certain stances work better on different difficulties. And I'd love to know what difficulty you're playing on. Let me know in the comments. What's your breaking point? Also, I'm still giving away a few copies of Jedi Survivor, so come follow me on Instagram and Twitter to check out the giveaways. And for a full breakdown of all the lightsaber stances and which one you should be using, watch this video here. And thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon.